All right, everybody, welcome back to Agile Driven Impact. Today we are in for a treat. We have a co-pilot episode for you. And what that means is that we have a guest who's hopping into the driver's seat with us. And today it's JJ Sutherland, the CEO of Scrum Inc. Some of you might know Scrum Inc. as the organization founded by actually JJ's father, Dr. Jeff Sutherland, who's the co-creator of Scrum. JJ has an incredible amount of expertise and experience in agility and in Scrum, working with organizations literally around the globe across a whole bunch of different industries, software, banking, nonprofit stuff, healthcare. It's a really long list. And so we're super excited to have JJ here to think about different ways that that experience helping teams adapt to change, accelerate value delivery. How can they use Scrum and agile ways of working to help build better people, better teams, and a better world? So JJ, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So yeah, we're super excited for this
Yeah,
co-pilot episode. And
great
so
to talk to you about a few different topics.
Sure.
I've known you for a long time, JJ, but
It's
I know
been a
that
while, both of
yeah,
you.
it's been a while.
I've known you
Yeah.
two for a long time.
Your path to where you are today, it went through being an award-winning correspondent and producer at NPR. And to me, that's kind of a fascinating journey. I wonder, how does your background in journalism, where clarity and storytelling are everything, shape how you help other organizations communicate their long-term priorities?
So I would say more than anything else, I was in broadcast journalism. So I was in radio, as you said, NPR. And the real thing that radio teaches you is deadlines. Is because I started out my career in journalism in local station in Boston, where I had to do a newscast every 28 minutes, and then you had to write it every 28 minutes. Doesn't matter. At 28 minutes past the hour, a red light goes on, and you better have something to say. And so that is, I actually think, the most powerful thing that I've learned from journalism is how fast you have to be. And the deadlines are real. And as I tell my children so much that really annoys them, so deadlines focus the mind. And what I have found, one of the things about Agile is that cycle of regular delivery on at pace. So whether you're doing a 1 week sprint, whether you're doing releasing every day, if you're doing something, you can do that like some software companies releasing 10 times a day, 100 times a day, if you're Amazon. But it's that really the learning of that cadence. And what happens in terms of the transparency piece you were saying is when you go live on the radio or you go live with your product, if you're doing software or whatever you're doing, you really learn about whether you're doing it right, whether you're building the right thing, whether your story is any good, all that kind of stuff, because you're forced to show it to the world. And you're forced to show it to a very judgmental world. And one where if you get something wrong, the world will let you know. And, and so it's the transparency is important because it says, are you doing the right thing? And okay, but then if you're not, it gives you the chance to say, well, 28 minutes later, I get to do it again. And I can get it right that time.
Right.
And so that is what I find one of the, I mean, there's other things that transparency does, but it's really transparency to your customers, transparency to whoever's getting value from what you're doing, whether it's, clients at a nonprofit, who are getting, you're delivering value to, you're helping them with whatever you're helping them with, or it's, government service, where like, for example, I renewed my license to the DMV today, did it online, and I could tell that they had Scrum teams behind there building this website because it was better than it was like
Sure.
last week. And it was just like, okay, they are delivering, getting that feedback. And that's what transparency gives you the most is feedback, whether it's from internally, from your coworkers, from your peers, from your management, or, but most importantly, from your customers.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's actually a little different take on it than I thought I would hear, which is really cool. I think that the idea that you had to put it out there each time and the feedback, and then you had to the fear had to be taken away, right? You had to say, okay, we have to release something, so here it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's powerful that cadence driving it. So I think you had something you wanted to follow up on this one with.
Well, I was Can you imagine if we started to tell teams that we're going to have 28-minute cycles of iteration? I'm like, whoo, we're not going to use that timestamp as our recommendation for folks, right? Because a lot of people are potentially new to Scrum or Agile that listen to our podcast. A lot of folks, JJ, you and I have talked when folks are just getting started, where do they start? And we've had that conversation before, but I have a different question for you about when people are getting started or learning about this idea. What do you think that Agile ways of working, that the Scrum framework, what do you think is the core problem that they help organizations solve?
There's a few. So first is clarity of what you're trying to accomplish. Because one of the things that you could, if you were listening to it going on every 28 minutes, was that totally new every 20 minutes? Or was it, I'm just making up? And what's the sort of the longer term piece of that? And what really happens with, an agile process is what are you trying to do? And you really need to be clear on that. And if you aren't, you learn to be clear because you're getting that feedback. So I was on with a pretty large customer this morning where they're doing a sprint review of, sort of they work, they have 2 week sprints, but then every 12 weeks, every quarter, basically, they get together and, do a review with the senior management. And so that was the review today. And there was one of these groups, and these were like initiatives that the senior management really cared about. There were 4 of them. They're like, these are our top 4 priorities this quarter. You guys have agile teams, go in and do this. And one of the teams was ready to go at the beginning of the quarter. A dedicated team, that's a big problem everyone has. You don't have a dedicated team. Yeah, and they were able to start doing it. But one of the teams, well, they said, well, our first sprint will be pulling together the team. Well, that actually took them 3 sprints. And you're doing 12 sprints. And then they took another couple of sprints saying, well, what are we actually trying to do? And so they showed up at this review, having really worked for about 4 weeks of the 12 on actually what the thing was. And what was great was that team said, we've learned, and what we want to tell the next group of teams that are going to be doing this next quarter, get that clarity of what you're trying to achieve, that definition of done. What is that? And that requires more investment than I think most people think about.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to a thought on many people that I work with, probably you as well. Think of a product backlog as a task list, right? A list of items that we've got to get done. And a lot of organizations don't see it as maybe their roadmap to their strategy, right? And what they really want to achieve long term. So, how have you helped teams and leaders shift their mindset to see it as such, to see it as something that is actually their strategy? The strategy doesn't live in the PowerPoint, but it lives in the backlog. How do you help people see that?
So I think about this client. So they have this person, they have like a 3-year strategy goal, and they, which is a little long, but hey, some things take a while. And but what they did is they wrote one sort of vision paper, which they iterated on a bunch. Like this took us a few weeks to get it done. And then they said, okay, well, how does that vision of what we want to do, what we want to deliver in 3 years? What are the strategies? What are the things that make that up to make that vision real? So then they have this plan. And then they say, okay, now that we have this plan of how we're going to do that, it's a pretty big thing that they're doing. How does all our backlog fit into that? How does each piece of backlog feed into which part of the plan? How does it help it deliver? And then how does that plan to deliver the vision? And they check whether it's right. Because sometimes the backlog will change because you'll learn something like, oh, that thing that we thought was really important to do isn't actually delivering that plan that's supposed to deliver on that 3-year goal. So we're actually going to change it. And so the backlog, it's important. It's how do you get your vision into a plan or a strategy, then into what are you going to do on Monday? Because but you need to connect all 3 of these. Because sometimes, like one group I'm working with, they make submarines. You don't make submarines in a year or 3 years or 10, right? They just take a long time. So they say, oh, but there's no way we could cut that down. I'm like, yes, but what are you going to do on Monday? You're going to do something. And how about we just sort of measure your work? Like, you're getting here, you're doing a submarine, or another client I work with does like apartment buildings or hotels, or these things take a long time. They take years to build. But it's sort of like, okay, but what is the part you're going to be able to deliver that you can see whether you're learning from it in 2 weeks? You're going to do something. And yes, it's not, there's this hotel exam. I was down there a couple weeks ago, and, they can't make money from this hotel till the hotel opens, right? And that's a couple of years. Like there's, hotels just it just takes time. But they were going at it when they thought it would take them 5 years. And I said, okay, well, what's getting in our way of getting down to 3 years? And a lot of that, years of waste was all of these things in the system that Agile can teach you if you're constantly trying to learn. You're putting something out. So they would finish a room instead of just, oh, we're just going to do the electricity. Then we're just going to do this. They would finish a room or a section and see whether it was right or not and get that judgment of the world. I mean, it wasn't customers, obviously, but it's from the inspectors or the safety inspectors or the quality inspectors, whatever it is.
I've never, well, now I don't want to get sidetracked by thinking about what a hotel build would look like with Agile and Scrum. I, I'm gonna
It's
get down to
wild.
like,
It is.
yeah,
So
that's why
you
I'm
walk
like,
in, there's Post-it notes on the wall,
Sure.
and there's product owners. I walked around with one of the product owners, and anyway, if you'd like, I can go into the story. It's really fascinating. We're working on a case. It's a company called Kayala, which is down in Guatemala City. We're working on a case study with them. We begin this is not a secret. This is something I can talk about because we've done speeches at conferences and stuff with them. It's really cool.
Cool.
well, and I think because, you know, obviously nonprofit background, all things race cars and other automobiles and things that move, right? Like the stories of where Agile and where Scrum work, it works everywhere, right? That's what we always all talk about. It works everywhere. But I think one of the things, if we talk about the formal language, product goal, firmly established as language, again, in the updated Scrum guide, people understand long-term commitment. But then when you start to talk to teams where maybe you're introducing Agile or Scrum for the first time, they're like, so we don't make products. We serve people. We are selling hotel rooms, right? Like the word product goal as a phrase isn't always the label that's meaningful to a group when you walk in. So when you're thinking about teams that might feel like they're non-traditional, is there something that you do to help them see and understand what the product goal is, even if maybe they want to use a different label?
So I see this part just about the part about the language for a second
Yeah.
with teams who my government customers. Like, we don't have customers. We don't have products. We don't have profit. And when you're doing change in an organization, so one argument, which I'm not sure if I totally agree with. So there's this guy who's a senior leader in the British government who I talk to about this all the time, and I think he's right because I was like, well, let's take the Scrum or Agile language because at one level, what do we care what the actual words are, right? These guys aren't reading the Scrum guide. Like, why would they? It's like it's not that helpful to them. But his point of view was, let's change the language because if we let them keep it in their old language, they actually won't change how they think.
Yeah.
And actually having new words that are slightly off, right? They don't quite fit with them. Help them get over that mental hurdle, saying they are something new. And actually, that that little road bump of sort of like the initial one of getting the mental model, to accept the new language, which a lot of them do now. This is in the Royal Navy. It's cause people are talking about backlogs and sprint goals and all this kind of stuff. But that's one argument. And then in another one of our customers is another very, very large traditional organization. They're like, we just can't do it. If we have a product goal or a product backlog, how about value or word Scrum Master, and like these terms just aren't going to work. Like, it's going to be such a thing to go over. And I'm like, I don't care. I call them German Shepherds. I don't mind. But we just care about what they're. And in the Scrum Guide, we care about what the accountability is. That's the role of a Scrum Master, the role of product owner, the role of a developer those are accountabilities, not necessarily job titles. So this needs to be done. Now, in terms of when people say, oh, what's our a product goal? I say, well, what is it that you want to deliver that, is not going to be done in a sprint? It's not going to be done in 3 sprints. It might be done in 6, or it might be done in 100. because some things like building a hotel just take a while. But what is that thing? Sort of like you have that vision, then you go up to that plan, and what is that thing that you're making this deliver? And it could be a service, right? So like, what's the product goal of an IT help desk? The product goal is like, how can we get better as an IT help desk, really, right? That's the goal, because it's like there's, taking calls, getting tickets in and out. How do they get better at doing that is the goal, not
Yeah, I think I like that one too, JJ, because I have this issue too. We have a lot of teams that work on sustaining activities,
right,
like they work on product improvements that are minor, but that means they're working on like 20 of them at once. And they're always like, I can't
right,
have a product goal. And it's like, well, I think that's a great advice, which is, your product goal might just be how do we work faster or better together to deliver this variety of things that we deliver, like
yeah,
a IT help desk or what have you, something that unifies the people on the team towards something, right?
yeah, and it's so like, okay, one of the things, especially in sustainment kind of teams, is say take some percentage of your capacity and devote it to process improvement. You have a Kaizen, even though you don't. So
Right.
how do you get better together? And
Right.
how do you inform each other and learn? Like one group we worked with a while back was a accounts payable group at this global corporation, and we put them together. These accounts payable, they just write checks all day, right? They get the report. It's not even they're not hiring anybody. They're not even deciding
Mhm.
whether to buy it. They're the people who just write the checks when the form comes through. And they're like, how can we be a team? We just, there's like kind of 8 of them, 10 of them, whatever it was. And what we said, let's just try. And then again, that transparency, as they realized, well, we can get better at this. And all of a sudden, every single one of them said, oh, well, the people are filling out the request form wrong for me too, in the same place. Maybe our form is wrong. It's not just our people being, we have to
Right.
bounce back the request all
Right.
the time. Maybe we should change the form. And
Sure.
they started getting better and learning together how to operate as a group. That they operated independently, not as a team.
Yeah.
And they realized, well, no, it's all this. And then one of the things that happened was, one of their headquarters is in New York. When COVID happened, the CEO of the company said, you know what? I want to prioritize paying all the small vendors because they're the ones who can't wait 6 months to get paid.
Right.
And if we let them, wait that long, they will go out of business.
Sure.
Just prioritize that way. And the accounts payable said, no problem. That's just reordering the backlog.
Yeah.
And they said, if before having that transparency and knowing that working as a team, they couldn't have done that.
Yeah, that's a good one. Because the next question I think I have is around the idea that we want to empower people, right? One of the challenges
Mm-hmm.
that I've seen in my industry is people sometimes use Scrum as a micromanagement technique, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they create a backlog of all these things, and then either a team below them or some team down the chain just gets these things and has to do them.
Right.
So how do you recommend structuring a backlog so that at each level in a organization, teams feel genuinely engaged in and therefore accountable to the long-term goals,
Right.
strategies, objectives?
And you're right, that can get tricky, especially in a large organization, right? You're in a 30,000 person organization and you're on the IT desk in Peoria. And how does your thing, mesh up with, global strategy in
Sure.
London or whatever?
Hmm.
It's like, how do you do that? And so the most important thing is you say, okay, here's the goal at whatever level of abstraction, whether it's the 3 year goal, the year goal, the quarter, whatever it is, next week, and say, here's what done is. We know we will have accomplished this when this is true. And like if you're building a race car like you used to do, it's like, well, the car drives and
Yeah.
it wins races, it goes fast. But but it could be whatever it is. We provided this service or we've helped these many people. And say, okay, now that's what I want, people. And then at the next level, they say, okay, well, if in 3 years we want to have we want the world to be in this state based on our organization. All right, now I got to figure out how I add up to that. What's my part in this? And the most important part is the discussion between senior leaders, the people below them, and people below. So there's a golden thread, because often what happens, especially in a large organization, but it happens in small ones, The senior leaders say, well, I want this. And then the people go away and they don't do that at all. They think they're doing it, but there's not this conversation.
Hmm.
And often it's because the more senior people don't get involved enough in forming what that definition of done
Right,
is.
right. They think empowering is, we told you what we want. You guys can do anything you want, but
Yeah.
if they have no guidance, they might come back with something
Yeah.
completely different than what the leader
Like
thought they
customers
wanted.
talking about this morning when I was talking about, working with the Royal Navy, the head of the Royal Navy shows up for these sprint reviews. He's a busy guy.
Yeah.
Trust me. He's a really busy guy. But he shows up because he knows, and every senior leader should know this, the most powerful thing you have is your time of attention. Things you choose to pay attention to are
Sure.
the things that are going to be most important in your organization. And if you say this thing is a priority for a strategic priority, you should show up and really engage in a feedback cycle with the people who are building that. Otherwise, they're not going to make the right thing, and you're not going to learn yourself as a senior leader. Oh, they've done this. I thought what we want to do is that, but actually, it's going to be a little because they've informed the senior leader, and the senior leader has given them. It's a two-way conversation.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that because that's so high level to be talking about the attention that the leader gives to something. Whereas often when we're thinking about people learning about product goals and they're worried about how do I write a product goal? Where do I put it? Which tool is best for me, right? Is it Asana? Is it Jira? Whatever. Where do I want to make it visible? Um, but that recommendation to think about where you're spending your time as a leader for the product goal, I think is more important than what sticky notes do you use or what tool, if I'm interpreting what you've
Yeah,
said
all the
there.
tools are horrible. They're all every. I've used
Doesn't matter
I've
which one
used
you use,
most
they're
of
all
them.
going to be bad.
I've used most of them as you have to, and they all suck. But
But
what
they're
it
better
is, you
than
say,
nothing.
okay, I'm, I'm sorry.
They could be better than nothing, right? Because
Yeah,
this
well,
means
and
I'm
you
talking
need
about
one,
you need
especially a
something.
large organization needs some way of tracking it. It needs
Yeah.
some way of doing it. But given that you absolutely have to have one, especially in an organization of any size, the thing you should really think about is that is to enable you to do this kind of thing, to choose what to pay attention to. And really, it's a cost, right? Any system that you use has friction built into it, and it slows things down a little bit, and there's a cost to it. All right, fine. But what you want to really is like, well, what is it? Why are we using? What is it supposed to allow us to accomplish? And so, what is the easiest way? And I'm a big believer in doing stuff physically with post-its and flip charts and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff,
same.
and then turning it into electronic stuff. So one of my teams, they just have AI listen to their planning meetings, and then it draws up all the Jira tickets and builds the sprint. It's wild. And they're at a customer now where they're doing one of the first things we do at Scrum, we go to a large thing, we do an assessment. Like where is the current state of the organization in terms of agility, ways of working, productivity, prioritization, all that kind of stuff. And in that, we do like a survey, and we do, like in this case, pretty big companies, so like 50 interviews. And so they also had AI listen to every single interview. And it started saying, hey, I've noticed this pattern across the interviews. And now that I've been trained on the Scrum Inc data and how you do this kind of stuff, this issue that these people create, you know what, in sprint 6 or 7 that you're doing of this, that's when this is going to come up. And it put something in the backlog. They did not tell it to do. It just did it. And it was right. So AI is pretty interesting. And I'm getting blown away more and more by that. So, but that's one of the teams that Scrum Inc is doing is just like, whoa, that's wild.
Maybe there's some hope for the tools that we all have and
Yeah,
use that they're going
maybe
to get
there's some hope.
smarter. I think the problem I always have with sticky notes, and Eric can attest to this, my penmanship is terrible. So if I'm given a stack of sticky notes, I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
explain it to folks and talk about it. But I think actually that's usually the point anyway, right? Like
yeah,
you can write it on a sticky note, but make sure you talk about it with other people so
yeah.
that it,
What is the point of the sticky note? It's
yeah.
capturing
Right.
an idea. It's capturing the decision or the focus of a conversation or of an idea, or hey, I'm putting this on sticky notes because I think better. Like some people just think better just to have things out of their head, right? Just get the cognitive load off of just trying to remember everything. I know I have that. I panic. I'm like, I gotta remember that. I remember that. I remember that. So, but if I can write it down, all of a sudden I can say, well, I still might not get to it because I can be lazy, but at least I know and I don't have to worry about not doing it.
What's the, I have one kind of curiosity, because I work a lot with different teams and see a lot of mistakes made. What would you say is the single biggest mistake that you've seen teams make when they try to use backlog to manage their long-term priorities and goals?
They don't prioritize.
Ah, okay.
They don't prioritize.
They just
They
make a
they
list and they really
they just
don't
make a
think about
list of
it. Mhm.
stuff, and then everything's of equal importance.
Sure.
And that's a big one. The other one is, as I said earlier, is having a really clear definition of done. A
Hmm.
really clear, what are we trying to do? How will we know when we're done? What does that mean? Because that can cost you in both ways. Sometimes you'll do more work than you should, than is valuable.
Yeah,
Sometimes you do less, or you go the
sure.
wrong direction. And
Sure.
it really helps again to have that conversation of, that backlog refinement of like, what does this mean? Because that way we all agree. Because how many times you must have had this all the time, Eric? Everyone says, "Oh, we understand what this epic is about or this story,"
Right. Yeah.
but there's nothing, and then they just go, "Well, that's not what I meant." It's
Yeah.
like, well, why did you
Yeah,
guys talk about it?
or they get all the way to what they think is the end of it, or whatever, and they're like, "Hmm, is this really done? What is done?"
Yeah,
Or they just drag it out forever. That's what I see
yeah.
more often is just this thing's supposed to be done in 3 months, and then somehow it just morphs into
Keeps
something
yeah,
completely different because they didn't clearly state the increment ends here.
yeah.
Yeah,
Like this, it's the deadline.
right, right. Yep.
Because a
Never
lot
that
of because
we've even learned things like this in building our own podcast. You
Yeah.
put two agilists into a room that have their own ways of doing things,
Yeah.
and you learn some things.
Yep. Definitely.
yeah,
Definitely
it's
do.
a lot of communication.
Yeah.
Yeah, front and center on that one. And so, JJ, we love to give like specific challenges and calls to action to our listeners, things that like if they listen to the episode, they're like, I want to try something. So if somebody's thinking whether they're, I don't know, maybe you're gonna have to give two different calls for action if you're up for it, because
Okay,
some people are
good.
gonna listen and they're like, I don't have a product goal. There's gonna be other people that are like, I have a product goal. What would be like the one thing that you'd encourage someone who has a product goal? What would be something you'd ask them to consider as a way to improve their approach to product goals? You know nothing about their tools, you know nothing about their industry, but you know they have a product goal. What would you say is a pretty general piece of,
I would say it's just what Eric said. Know what done means. And does everyone agree? And then write it down.
hmm,
And that will speed you up so much. Because I was talking about that one team that didn't have the team together or the product goal, and all of a
Hmm.
sudden they really only had 2 sprints at the end of the day to do it. And they figured it out, but know what done means and how will you know it? What, to use the terms like, what are the acceptance criteria? What does done mean? How will you know that you've changed the world the way you want to change the world? How will you know that whether that has
That's
happened?
really good advice. Yeah.
well, and having listened to you give that piece of advice for somebody who has a product goal, is your advice the same for a
Yeah,
team that doesn't have a product goal? I'm like, you're like, ditto, same?
yeah, like it's absolutely the same. Like, well, why do you exist? I
Yeah.
mean, not existentially, but like okay, you're a team, you're trying to do something. Why? It's the same thing as we were just saying. Have a product goal. What is the value you're delivering to the world? What is the service you're providing? Why is a company paying you money? Why are you, if you're, I don't know, volunteering at your church, what are you trying to accomplish with that, whatever, the church sale or whatever? What is it that you're trying to do? And sort of capture it. And then when you're working on a team, which is what agility is about, to make sure everyone shares the same view of what that is.
Sure.
What are we trying to maximize? What are we trying to change? What are we trying to deliver? And we all agree that we'll know, we'll have done it when this happens,
Sure.
when this is true.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's really good.
All right, everybody. So you need to have clarity. Where are you headed? What's your definition of done? Have shared understanding and agreement on what that is.
Right.
There we go. That was my paraphrase of JJ. I should never try to
Absolutely.
do that. But we are so grateful for you being here. And I think if people want to learn more about your work, the case studies that Scrum Inc. has available, they go to your website,
Yeah,
right?
just go to scruminc.com or pick up either of the books, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time or the Scrum Field Guide. You know, And sometimes I just
They're
say,
great
hey,
books.
want to know how to do it? I actually wrote down exactly how I do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. They're both on our bookshelves for sure all the time. You can find them on all the online platforms and yeah, check out your local
Yeah,
bookstores too. And so, JJ, we are so grateful that you spent some time with us as a co-pilot here at Agile Driven Impact. And I think, yeah, given some great tips for folks to consider. And we need to just give one little shout out, if we could, to our season 2 sponsor while you're still here. Eric?
absolutely.
Yeah, Agile and nonprofits. So they also have great resources for your mission-driven organization, templates for things like backlog, story mapping, other things like that. So check them out at agilenonprofits.com.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great resource.
Yeah.
Definitely
Well,
check it out.
JJ, thanks again for being with us. And
Well,
our
thank you.
usual sign-off line is keep driving that
Yeah,
impact. So if you don't mind, we'll use that as our closer with you too, right?
sure.
Sure.
All right. So thanks again for being with us, and everybody, we'll see you next time.
Thank you,
You
JJ.
bet.